Okay, I'm back with Jaiciey Owens. This is part 2, a continuation of part 1. So we had just left off at Haley had shown up, or no, I'm sorry. You had Haley just shown up, or you were telling Mama that you wanted to leave?
Haley had just shown up.
Okay, all right. So go ahead and continue.
So Haley showed up, and I told my Nana that I had to leave and go tell my dad, and my dad lived in the north end of Boise at the time, and I was just a mess. I was just a hot mess because I had already been trying to call you at the time, and you weren't picking up the phone, so I thought that maybe you had already gotten there and you already saw everything, or you already knew, and I was just like in hysterics. And so Nana said I wasn't leaving, and I said that Dad needed to know what was going on, especially with what I found on Talon's phone. Like, I didn't know at what point you were at in that whole entire fiasco. So I got in the car. I got in Haley's car. She just drove straight to the house because I dropped my phone and didn't ever get back to her. Like, I was still on the line with her when she came and picked me up. And she drove me to go see Dad. And at this point, it's like 1 a.m. And I was like banging on the door at 1 a.m. And my Aunt Sarah had answered. She was his roommate at the time. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Get out of my way. Talon's dead." That's all I could even comprehend. She's like, "Jaicey, are you drunk?" Like, I remember her looking me in the face, and she's like, "Jaicey, are you drunk?" And I was like, "No, you don't even get it." And I got myself into the house. I woke Dad up, and I think he was working graveyard shifts or something somewhere, but he just sat up in bed, and he's like, no, that's not right, that didn't happen." And I was like, "No, I found this is his phone. Look, this just happened. I keep trying to call Mom, and she's not answering. We need to go. I don't know where we're going, but we need to go." And in that moment, I believe you called Dad, and you said, "I have Talon. We need to get back to the house. We have some stuff to talk about." And I was literally just like, what happened? I was like that rush of relief that he wasn't dead. It was a whole new, it was a high I've never felt before. When you said that you had him, I didn't know in what state he was in, physically or mentally or emotionally. When you told me, when I heard that you had him and that we were going back to the house, I was like, what? What happened? What happened in between? I didn't know what to anticipate.
What happened in between?
Yeah. So go ahead.
And I just was kind of sort of tripping about how awesome that it would feel to feel that feeling right now, to have this all be some crazy nightmare that we get to wake up from. So I'm driving downtown, and I'm beside myself because I'm like, what has he done? I'm not quite comprehending that my son has snuck out of the house and is now in police custody. So I'm just really trying to figure out, and I'm not really thinking worst case scenario, really, because I know Talon's not a deviant kid. Not that he wouldn't do teenage stupid stuff, but I wasn't thinking worst case scenario. But when I pulled up downtown where he's supposed to be, there's police tape, and there's police, and there's cop cars, and it literally looks like a crime scene. And I am thinking, I see Talon sitting on the curb, and I'm thinking, what has he done? Where are his friends? What has he done? Where is friends? I'm not seeing the crime scene, but I'm seeing the tape, and I'm seeing the cops, and I'm seeing Talon, and I'm really kind of baffled. I'm not quite sure what's going on. But he looks upset, and he's on the curb, and I start approaching Talon, and this police officer comes up from the other side his cop car is kind of parked away from Talon, but he sees me approaching Talon, and he comes towards me and intercepts me and says, I just think you need to know that your son was here to end his life. And I looked over at Talon, and my heart just sunk. And I also remember the moment having that feeling of, oh my gosh, I almost just lost my child. And then I had this like sense of relief of, you know, I was so thankful that he was here and that this wasn't a tragedy, right? And I went over to him and I laid my head on his shoulder and I just cried. I really didn't have any words at the moment because I just was so grateful that something awful didn't just happen. So we went, took him back home, and I knew that it was an emergency situation and that he was going to need some help. And I just remember talking to him I just felt like forever. I know it was over an hour, probably closer to an hour and a half, and he just would not budge. He did not want to go to Intermountain Hospital.
I remember that.
He was
We had the Jack and Jill bedroom, so Talon's room was set up over here, and then there was a bathroom connecting my bedroom to his bedroom, and I could hear everything going on. And I was sitting on my bed, hearing you guys try to talk him into going into the hospital. And I was at Intermountain Hospital just earlier that summer prior for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember thinking, like, there is a reason I went in for 3 days, and I know what was in there. I know what was there.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he needed a reset and a reality check and to experience being disconnected and reevaluate where his mindset's at. And I kind of told him that too, because Papa came into my bedroom and he was like, no one's going to be able to talk him into going into the hospital but you. Because I remember you telling Talon, like, you are literally not leaving my sight, like, ever. If you think you're leaving my sight, you're not leaving my sight, like, ever.
I told him I was going to tie myself to him. I literally told him that. That's when he was like, because I was serious. When you were going through your stuff, I remember checking on you. I couldn't sleep. I could not. I mean, that's when I was like, you're going, like, we're not doing this, because I could not. I was so upset. I couldn't sleep. But so yes, he went. He didn't want to go. I think it's important to note that he did not want to go because he thought he was gonna get bullied. He did not want anybody.
He didn't want the stigma.
He didn't want anybody to know. He didn't want my dad to know. There was nobody in the family that he wanted. He didn't want family. He didn't want friends. It was like this deep, dark secret that he was going to take with him to the grave, because he did not want to be associated with weakness, is what I think. Emotional weakness, you know.
Well, I think that, and also that's such a vulnerable place to be emotionally.
That's what I mean.
He wasn't ready to talk about it with a lot of people. What he had seen.
Oh yeah,
we haven't even gotten to that part.
We haven't even talked about that.
Oh, we got so many layers.
I know. How did we skip that completely? Where did we go?
We'll look back on this and be like, shoot, this is
let's
happened.
Back up, because what Talon saw, what we found out later. So he does go into the hospital.
We're at your part where you. Oh yeah, it's because we were talking about how I had to convince him to go into the hospital. Let's wrap up that part first, because
he went into the hospital and he came out and he was a different kid. In fact, this would be a good segue into what he did see, because what he saw stopped him, changed his paradigm forever, and everything that he ever learned up until that point, all of the tools, the life tools that he had, man, he grabbed every single one of those and gave 110% to every life skill that he had learned. And you just saw him just 110% focus on just pouring into life. But so Talon gets up on the ledge, and he goes on to share his story because he decides that he doesn't want people to feel alone. He knows the value and the power in sharing his story. Hold on just a second. Did you want to add anything, or do you want to tell?
So when he went into Intermountain, he kind of had this attitude about him at first, because I was upset at him. I was like, this was something I had to process after he passed away too, because I was upset at the circumstances surrounding it, and I was having a hard time coping with it. And the thing about depression...
Explain that, because I don't understand what you meant by that.
His attitude around going into Intermountain, his attitude going into Intermountain was whatever. I'm here, whatever. That was the very first, because when I went in to see him at Intermountain, he was like, well, I'm just going to kick it here for like maybe another month or so. And I was like, how dare you? How dare you kick it here for another month or so? Like, what, Mom?
I was just going to say, there's a problem when we interrupt each other. So if I do that, it just means that I wanted to interject. But every time that we went to see him, his attitude was different. So one day, the very first day, you're right, he was flippant. He had an attitude. He had a chip on his shoulder. And I'd never seen this side of Talon before in my life. I'd never seen that like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was so flippant and so like just... He
was angry. He was upset.
And I'd never seen that, but I really honestly had never seen that side of him before. But it was hurtful because it was a different side of Talon. And then there was a day that we went and he just had complete anxiety. Like he was hyperventilating. He was freaking out. It was so hard to leave him that time because you could tell that he was just hurting that day and he didn't understand like what was going on. And there was another day that we went and he was just happy and he was learning stuff and he was doing good and he was making friends. And yeah, but every day it was like something was different. There was a different attitude.
Do you want to know what I think the pivotal point was? Something that we all cherish from his time in the hospital was when he was writing in his journal, and he wrote a page to each of us. Mm-hmm. You remember that? Mm-hmm. Of course you remember that. I feel like when you have to, because in Intermountain, I was there for 3 days. There's no clocks. You're going 15 minutes by 15 minutes, or at least when I was there. Yeah, they don't have clocks. So when you don't have time to reference, it's kind of like a timeout. It felt like a timeout for me, like a 3-day timeout. I was upset at first. I went through these same emotions that he did. I knew going out of it, like when he came out, I was like, bro, you are going to, because something that's not talked about in mental illness, especially in kids, is when you have mental illness that runs up and down both sides of your family, like you need to talk about it, because there are going to be times where your brain just isn't producing enough serotonin, and like you can't process that as a kid, especially when you're going through puberty and you're changing, and you also have to worry about like your social status in high school and all these different things, because you're discovering who you are, that with a chemical imbalance in your brain that you don't have control of, you know, especially when, like, I remember this was the first time Talon and I had a discussion about mental illness in our family. We sat down and we talked about every single person in our family who has mental illness. Oh, yeah. And we sat down and we said, how do we prevent this in ourselves in the future? How do we teach this to the girls? How do we get through this together? Because if there's ever another time that he feels that way, he has to call me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that was a conversation we had to have. And that was the first time we had that conversation after we had both already gone there and came back. You know, this is just something that, you know, we need to open up the dialogue about too.
So let's talk about that. As a parent, what should I have done different? What could I have done different?
As a parent, I think that sometimes it's hard as a teen to really speak their truth about how they're really feeling, because there's a generational gap. I think there's like fear of not understanding, and maybe fear of not understanding comes with fear of not being able to control how you react to not understanding. Does that make sense? It's like fearing an unpredictable reaction. Like, and when you're a worrying parent, like, I think that with communicating these things to you, we were scared of losing freedom. I think that's what it is like communicating that out of fear of losing freedom.
Communicating exactly what?
Mental and emotional health issues.
Because if you say that you have issues, what freedom are you going to lose?
Maybe you wouldn't let us go out as much. Maybe there would be like,
which is probably true. I mean,
you know, like, you know what I mean. I feel like for me personally, that was where I felt like I had to hold back. I feel like maybe
because I wasn't easy to talk to, you feel like you guys held it in and that made things worse.
And because you worry. We didn't want, I know I didn't want you to overly worry about me. You know, you already worried enough about me. I don't want you to overly worry about me, even though I probably needed it.
It's hard to tell your parents not to worry, you know. I guess when I think what could I have done different, I think about, you know, it makes you feel really bad as a parent to like realize that your kids, more than one, didn't find enough value with themselves that they contemplate suicide. That, you know, you feel like such a failure as a parent.
But this is where the conversation about mental illness, because it's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of like the conversations and the narrative that's happening inside their brain. It's like opening up the dialogue. Like with Sierra, I had to tell her as soon as she got home from the hospital that there's going to be another time. Like, it was the exact same conversation. And guess what? She called me. When it happened. She's like, I feel it. I know what you're talking about. Like, I don't have, because when she came out of the hospital, she was like riding that high of like being out. You remember? She's like,
I remember, because she's like, I'm fine. You don't even need to worry anymore.
I took her to coffee and I was like, dude, this is literally the pattern of mental illness, and it runs up and down our family, both sides. Like, we're going to talk about this because it might not be in 2 weeks, it might not be in 2 months, or maybe it will be. But there's going to be a time that you might feel like that feeling all over again. And that's because you have a chemical imbalance in your brain that's genetic. And also, you have post-traumatic stress disorder that came with, like, you know, there's, like, all these things on top of these things that just needs, like, when you're a kid and your brain isn't fully developed anyway, it's hard for your mind to, like, wrap around the totality of a situation until, like, the day that it all makes sense, then you realize that it all makes sense. Does that make sense?
I think so. You know that you're suicidal or you know that you're struggling, it's good to have a conversation with somebody or have a backup, somebody that you can message or call if you need somebody to talk to.
Oh.
I think more than that, though, I think a lot of it is just preventative, right? Learning how to change your...
I have something to share. I have something to share on that topic. Look at this. This is my safety plan. I got this at a mental health day in my when I went to massage therapy school.
Oh, that's cool.
And how I know when I'm struggling, and it has 1 through 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say I feel anger, I can't sleep, I can't eat, and I get quiet. Like those are my triggers to myself that I know that I'm struggling. Family or friends, I can call for help. I have 4 people listed right there with their phone numbers. Things I can do to take my mind off of problems: walk, grizz, paint, meditate, run. Professionals I can contact, and it also lists the suicide prevention hotline. People and places that distract me, and how to keep safe in my environment. And here are my reasons for living.
Family, friends, grizz. I want to travel, heal people, and be an influencer. And you kind of are doing all those things.
I am. Really this cool. Is my safety plan. So on that topic, and this stays in my love journal.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because it goes along with what I was saying, is that preventative, we need to give people preventative measures. So how do we get ourselves out of that dark space? Because it happens, even with me and Talon's death, I could stay there if I wanted to. I could stay, I could wallow, I could go into the deepest, darkest hole and pit of despair and just grovel. But you don't. You learn a different mindset. You say, how do I want to be happy, huh?
I said you have to. I agree.
Yeah, and it's very much a choice. I will tell you, every day I choose several times, multiple times, often, just probably like you run into your triggers, and you have to immediately acknowledge them, and you have to move through them, and you learn at a, every day it's a new pace. Every trigger, it's another experience, but we work through them, and we learn how to navigate, and it comes from a mental place of finding ways to change our mindset into a more grateful mindset, a more joyful one. I had mentioned on Facebook the other day, one thing that I really am intentional about is making sure that several times a day I find a way to enhance that moment, whether it's adding music to the moment, adding dancing, adding singing. I'll look at the moment that I'm in, and I'll go, how can I make this a little bit funner? I don't do it often, but eventually it's going to become such a habit that my whole life is just going to be finding, I'm probably going to look like a crazy person just dancing around the world. Huh?
I already love that version of you so much.
Oh, good. Well, it's a version I'm working on, but habits.
Every day we're working on our best versions of ourselves, right?
Absolutely. Okay. So Talon came out of Intermountain. He ended up sharing his story publicly on the Idaho Statesman, which won several awards. Zach Kyle wrote the article, and again, an amazing article about Talon's experience, where he had gone up to an 8-story parking garage to end his life, and he had got up on the ledge and was looking around and kind of taken everything in one last time. And he got down to just kind of think for a second, and got right back up on the ledge and had looked and was just getting ready to find a landing spot when he said that he watched a lady 5 stories down push herself away from the outside of the rail and fall 3 stories and hit the
he was on the 8th story, and she was on the 3rd story.
The 3rd story.
This lady was 5 stories underneath him.
So the exact same place.
The exact
same huge
building,
parking garage.
Same side, the same day. It was a Wednesday.
It was a Wednesday, midnight. Not even a weekend.
And this lady was like 36 years old. They both survived that night too.
They did both survive. And that jump saved his life. And he went on to share that story because it was a miracle. I mean, it was there was divine intervention. And it's a powerful story of, two people end up at the same place, same side of a huge parking garage, attempting to end their lives. And one woman's push from a rail saves Talon's life and gives him a second chance. And in which he goes on to share that story publicly, touched so many lives by sharing his story. And then Thanksgiving happens.